Welcome back to the Midnight Archive. I'm your guide through the stories that live in the dark, the accounts that don't fit neatly into boxes, the boundaries between belief and evidence, the voices that call from just beyond the porch light. We explore what communities have whispered for generations, what skeptics can't quite debunk, and what the internet amplifies when it shouldn't. If you're curious about the unexplained, the unsettling, and the untold, you're in the right place. Let's go deeper. Midnight on a reservation road. Headlights wash over sage and rock. Something moves. Low, wrong, watching. It turns, and a voice you know calls your name from the dark. The desert wind carries it farther than it should. This is where fear becomes a boundary. Some stories keep communities safe. Careless words can break trust. We'll honor limits. We won't reveal restricted ceremonies. We'll rely on public scholarship and reported accounts. There is a scream, captured on public land, that spread online like wildfire. To understand why it rattled so many people, we have to go back before the camera, before the algorithm. To speak clearly, we need the frame the Dine live by. Hoju, a lived state of balance, beauty, and right relations. Everything meaningful moves toward harmony. A skinwalker, in public descriptions, stands outside that order. Not a monster by birth, a choice. In many Indigenous perspectives, this is witchcraft that breaks kinship to gain power, often described as using animal forms, traveling at night, seeking secrecy, and acting against community well-being. The unsettling truth is that the danger isn't only what it does, it's what it represents. A trusted person turned inward, using knowledge for harm. We have to respect the boundaries. Traditional teachings are protected. Naming specifics is restricted for reasons tied to safety and sacredness. So we stay with what's openly discussed by Navajo writers and public sources, that there are taboos around speaking names directly, especially after dark, that stories remind children to come home, to be careful which voices they follow, that healing is about restoring balance, not staging a spectacle. If we keep only one rule in mind, it's this: some knowledge is for the people, not for the audience. Reported attributes appear again and again. Animal skins, especially of fast, wary creatures. Coyotes, wolves, owls. Movement that looks almost human and then isn't. Voices that mimic family members or call from just beyond the line of light. Knocking on windows that stops the moment you rise. The figure on a ridge that keeps pace with a truck longer than legs should allow. These aren't just scares. They're cues that something violates the ordinary rhythm of night on the land. But let's consider how history shaped the way these stories were told. Colonization brought pressure that fractured families and languages. Boarding schools punished Indigenous language and ceremony. In times of fear and scarcity, witchcraft accusations can spike. Anthropologists documented parts of this world with mixed accuracy, some carefully, others carelessly, filtering what they heard through a foreign lens. Newspapers in nearby towns turned fragments into spectacle. The result, an inside conversation about ethics and danger, became an outside curiosity, stripped of context. What nobody knew at the time, or chose not to hear, is how accusations cut both ways. When harm visits a community, illness, missing livestock, sudden deaths, people search for the cause. Sometimes the threat is human, sometimes it's disease, Sometimes it's weather. And sometimes suspicion lands on those already marginalized. That tension sits at the heart of Skinwalker talk. The possibility that someone is choosing malevolent power and the equal danger of wrongly placing that blame. The moral core remains consistent. Hoju is the compass. Stories about witches serve a societal purpose. They draw a fence around behaviors that sever trust. The taboos function like guardrails at night. Don't whistle into the dark. Don't call someone's name from outside their door. Don't repeat stories that aren't yours to tell. From the inside, this is risk management and respect. From the outside, it can look like mystique. The difference matters. Meanwhile, there's a practical layer to consider. Night on the high desert plays tricks. Sound travels far. Wind carries voices through arroyos like a tunnel. Owls can sound human. Coyotes can synchronize yips into something that feels coordinated. Skeptics point to pareidolia, the mind's habit of making patterns, and to cultural priming. They're not wrong to note these forces. But witnesses across decades describe specific rules. The mimicry that uses names, the runner who matches highway speed, the boundary games at doors and windows. The evidence suggests there's a structured pattern in how the fear manifests, whether you view it as the supernatural crossing a line or as a social technology warning people away from danger. So we hold both truths. Indigenous communities maintain teachings that are not public, and that is their right. Publicly, Skinwalker stories express a profound anxiety, betrayal inside the circle, the figure that wears a familiar shape but carries harm. It remains a chilling possibility that gives the stories their power, and it explains why, generations later, when a scream echoes through a canyon and lands on a phone microphone, people still feel the old rules stirring in their chest. To grasp today's viral clips, we have to start here, with balance, taboo, and the break that turns a person into a boundary others won't cross. While teachings stayed guarded, the frontier found the edges and pulled. Traders carried rumors from posts along dusty trails. Small town papers printed fragments, half-remembered words, altered spellings, dramatic headlines that sold copies. The figure from DNA warnings became a commodity, trimmed to fit a Western appetite for the uncanny. Missionaries arrived with certainty and notebooks. Some tried to translate with care. Others reduced complex taboos to devil talk. Early anthropologists wrote what they were allowed to hear, or what they assumed they heard. Important terms were flattened. Sacred boundaries were crossed. What survived in print often looked like a mirror fogged by breath, shapes visible, meanings obscured. Meanwhile, cattle replaced older grazing patterns, and with them came new conflicts. Predators moved in, or were blamed for losses. Horses vanished from pens. A boot print near a slaughtered ewe could mean a thief, or a neighbour accused of witchcraft. In isolated settlements, lawmen rode long distances and arrived late. Fear did the rest. Here's a pattern that kept returning in accounts from the era. Tracks that change mid-course. Hoof marks in soft arroyo sand that become bare human feet at the edge of sage. A herder follows at dawn, heart pounding, until the prints simply stop at a rocky rise, as if the trail had been lifted into the air. He stands there, listening to the wind, feeling watched. He goes home before the heat comes on. Those papers loved that kind of story. They added details, sharpened teeth, raised the stakes. Shapeshifter terrifies camp, a headline might claim. What wasn't on the page was the fallout. Accusations tore at families. A widow seen walking late could be whispered about. A medicine person with rivals might wake to a smashed window. Frontier justice didn't consult cosmology. It moved fast and left scars. But let's test the ground under those prints. Misidentification thrives in low light. Coyotes scatter as one and leave broken trails. Hoof-to-foot transitions can be an artifact of soft sand collapsing under wind, revealing older marks beneath. People misremember under stress. And yet, even with a skeptical lens, some reports included consistent features: nocturnal approach, mimicry at doors, uncanny pacing along ridgelines. Daylight often collapsed the drama, but not always. Mission reports noted fevers, wasting illnesses, and sudden deaths attributed to malevolent power. Today, we check water sources, pathogens, nutrition. Back then, the unseen was a culprit, with a face shaped by local belief. One thing is clear: when institutions failed, reservation agents absent, courts uninterested, witchcraft accusations became a language for grievance, grief, and control. Unknown to many outside readers, communities were also managing risk through story. The rule, "Don't answer voices from the dark," wasn't just superstition. It was good night safety where raiders, drifters, and predators moved. The taboo, "Don't name it aloud," contained panic, preventing spirals of blame. Folklore and function walked together. And while pulp narratives turned fear into entertainment, reservation roads kept collecting fresher accounts, told softly in kitchens and at morning corrals. The print era fixed the image in the broader imagination. The land kept its own ledger. As the century turned, the gap between spectacle and lived experience widened, and the roads at night stayed busy. Now we move to the stories told low after dishes are stacked and the porch light clicks off. These aren't confessions to outsiders. They're reminders to each other, rules spoken like weather reports. Don't whistle after dark. Don't stand in the doorway with the light behind you. Don't say the name that invites attention. The thing is, these rules carry both fear and care. They keep children close. They mark the line between safety and provocation. The motifs repeat across town lines and years. Knocking that lands once, twice, then vanishes the moment you rise. A voice in your mother's tone calling from the yard while your mother sleeps in the next room. Shapes pacing a truck along a dirt road. Always on the ridge. Always keeping distance, never losing speed. It's reported that headlights flatten them into stick figures with joints that bend at the wrong hinge. People learn not to stop. The boundary is the cab. The rule is to keep rolling. Consider a cluster of roadway reports, 2-lane stretches where ranch gates sit far apart and mile markers feel stale. Drivers describe runners who appear in the rear view as a smear, then align with a passenger window matching 40, 50, sometimes more, without breath or stumble. Sometimes the figure taps lightly, not to break the glass, just to be known. Sometimes nothing touches the truck at all, but the radio hisses or a familiar nickname slips through the open vent. The advice passed down is simple. Don't answer. Don't look a second time. Rooflines hold their own signatures. Families hear pacing that moves too fast for a person, but too steady for a raccoon. 3 steps, pause, a knuckle on the swamp cooler casing. Then the weight shifts to the far corner. Dogs hide under beds. The old rule surfaces again. Don't go outside to chase it off. Don't give it your face. Turn on a light if you must. Pray if you will. Wait it out. A micro-story sits at the center of many kitchens. A family hears their grandmother calling from outside, asking for the door. Her voice is unmistakable. Rhythm, breath, even the small throat clear she makes when she's tired. The granddaughter moves to the knob. An uncle speaks from the table without looking up. She's asleep, sit down. They listen. The voice softens, asks again, then uses the granddaughter's childhood nickname, one only the grandmother employs. Still, no one rises. The sound thins and slides away along the wall like a hand brushing stucco. In the morning, the grandmother laughs it off, but her eyes don't. From one perspective, these are social tools. Don't follow strange voices is a universal safety rule. From another, the details feel too tuned to be generic caution. The mimicry isn't random, it chooses intimacy. It targets the person most likely to open the door. When skeptics raise coyotes and owls, community members nod. Yes, those sounds carry. Then they add the part that won't fit, the way the voice knows a private joke, the way footsteps match a father's gait, the way a nickname lands with the right tease and warmth. The boundary being tested isn't only physical, it's relational. Highway scenes come with small, verifiable anchors. A driver shows fresh handprints in fine dust on the door, higher than a person could reach without climbing. Another brings a dashcam file where a shape flares and collapses at the edge of the beam, the gate wrong by one beat. Law enforcement logs sometimes note suspicious activity, then add a line about coyotes or pedestrians. Explanations sit beside the report without resolving it. Skeptical tension helps sharpen the pattern. Coyotes do habituate to roads. Wind through culverts can shape a scream that sounds human. Auditory illusions make voices out of static. Meanwhile, witnesses keep describing a set of rules. Never cross a threshold without consent. Never break glass. Only rattle it. Never step fully into a cone of light, but orbit its edge. If these are misreadings, they're strangely consistent misreadings. If there's something else, the tactics suggest intention. What nobody knew at the time of any single event is how fear and hygiene interact. Sleep debt warps perception. Adrenaline turns brush into bodies. Yet communities have countermeasures. Some keep a light burning near the door. Some hang specific herbs or carry ash from a ceremony. Details kept private on purpose. Others refuse to say the word at night. It's a firewall, cultural and spiritual. It's also effective. When you don't invite, you don't engage. And then there's the practical wisdom folded into every tale. Travel in pairs on long stretches. Call ahead before you arrive so no one opens a door to a voice in the dark. Keep dogs inside after midnight because dogs don't always sense friend from mimic. These stories aren't dares, they're protocols. They preserve Hoju in the simplest way, by keeping people alive to see the morning. So the night catalogue grows. Knocks, voices, runners, footsteps, each one a reminder. Boundaries matter, each one a lesson. Some things stand just past the porch light, studying how we love each other, listening for the easiest way in. The unknown didn't stay on the res. It learned a new road, fiber, towers, and feeds that never sleep. Early web forums turned campfire distance into a glowing screen where anonymous handles traded night stories. Threads about shapeshifters mixed family cautions with pure invention, and the border between folklore and fiction thinned. A post would start with a familiar rule, don't whistle after dark. and end with a twist meant to earn replies. The internet gave the old fear an amplifier and a mask. Then came video. Handheld cameras, dashcams, trail cams. Grainy frames of something moving wrong at the edge of a headlight cone. A voice on an open mic that seemed to say a name. YouTube compilations stitched fragments into a montage. Long limbs, an uncanny gait, faces that looked almost human until they didn't. TikTok accelerated the drift. 10 seconds of shock, a caption that asked, "What did I just see?" and a soundtrack that trained you to feel dread before the reveal. A pattern emerged. The aesthetic leaned into distortion. Overstretched silhouettes, backbent runners, audio clips where a laugh arrived one syllable late, as if the upload itself had warped the world. Like peeling back old wallpaper, each new viral layer revealed an older pattern beneath. Mimicry, boundary games, and a fixation on the threshold between inside and out. Modern viewers were reacting to modern artifacts, but the beats came from older rooms. False positives multiplied. Low-light sensors hunt for edges, not truth. Compression crushes shadows into stepping ghosts. A fox scream overdriven by a phone mic becomes a human wail. A deer filmed mid-stride at 1:30 shutter looks insectile. Pareidolia does the rest, sketching faces into noise. Investigators tried to pin clips to places and dates and ran into the same wall. Missing originals, re-uploads without metadata, creators incentivized to dramatize because tension earns watch time. But some posts carried daylight anchors. A rancher shared photos of tracks leading along a fence line. Dog-like at first, then a heel and arch shape across frozen mud. Another account paired a night scream with a sheriff's log about suspicious activity on the same road. Still, the footage faltered under scrutiny. Angles misled. Scale was guessed, not measured. Without ground truth, the best anyone could say was unresolved. Meanwhile, creepypasta did what folklore always does. It evolved to fit the medium. Stories adapted to headset audio and midnight scrolling. Mimicry moved from the yard to the inbox. DMs from cloned accounts. Voice notes synthesized to sound like a friend. The narrative logic remained intact. Don't answer the voice that isn't who it claims to be. Don't open the digital door just because the name looks familiar. There's a second layer, verification as ritual. Entire channels emerge to analyze frames, enhance audio spectrograms, cross-reference weather reports. Audiences gathered not just for the scare, but for the process. It became communal divination with spreadsheets, a way of restoring a little hozu to chaotic feeds. And yet, the unsettling truth is that the platforms reward ambiguity. Clear answers end a session. Uncertainty keeps you scrolling. The algorithm is a night road lined with suggestions. It paces your truck at 70 miles an hour. Skeptics catalogue the usual suspects: costumes, VFX, misread wildlife, groupthink. Fair. Then they ran into a different problem: repetition with specificity. Across years and creators, we saw those same rules of the boundary: knock, mimic, orbit the light, don't cross the threshold. Either 1,000 storytellers copy-pasted the same template, or something older seeped through and set the form. The evidence suggests both forces at work: imitation chasing engagement, and a deeper cultural pattern shaping what even hoaxers choose to fake. So we navigate between spectacle and respect. We can say, most viral clips don't prove the extraordinary. We can also say, the viral form reveals what we're primed to fear: voices that know our names, shapes that watch but won't step fully into view, identities that can be worn. And that brings us back to those footprints in daylight. Some claims come with police logs, livestock losses, and neighbours who won't talk on camera. The feed can't adjudicate that, it can only echo. Moving deeper into this case, we arrive at the places where stories meet fences and ledgers, ranches that keep time by carving seasons and water trough levels. Here, the claims repeat with an unnerving cadence. Something watches from the sage. Pens found locked at dusk sit open by dawn. Hardware unbent, bolts slid from the inside. Livestock turn up dead without obvious tracks leading in or out. And when tracks do appear, they break rules. Dog-like trails that stop mid-field. Human-looking prints taken over frozen ground with no sign of approach. Ranch narratives put skin on the old motifs. An unseen presence orbits yard lights, never stepping into the glare. Dogs refuse to cross the porch. A heifer is discovered bloodless by rumour, organs missing by claim, the perimeter unmarked. The unsettling truth is that fear thrives where money and life depend on animals living through the night. Every loss has a cost, and that cost amplifies the search for a cause. But let's test what can be tested. Forensic realities complicate the spectacle. Scavengers open carcasses quickly, targeting soft tissue, eyes, udders, reproductive organs, because that's where access is easiest. Blowflies colonize within minutes. Their larvae can mimic surgical edges as tissue dehydrates and pulls. Post-mortem artifact patterns, like skin slippage and gas bloating, reshape wounds into tidy circles by morning. A body that looked drained under a flashlight may simply be pulled by gravity. Blood settles internally when the heart stops. Investigators who've walked enough fields can read these signatures the way ranchers read clouds. Law enforcement notes the same frictions. Deputies write suspicious activity, then add wildlife explanations or point to human vandalism. Rural agencies face long response times and thin resources. Night calls compete with domestic disputes and highway crashes. By the time a unit arrives at a ranch gate, hours have passed, tracks have degraded, and stories have gelled. Reports become a compromise between what can be documented and what's believed. A micro-story brings the tension to a frost line. A deputy follows fresh prints across stubble toward a barbed wire fence. The tracks are clear: heel, arch, toes. On his side, they crisp against white. At the fence, they stop. He climbs over, breath pluming, scans the other side. Nothing for 30 yards. Then, faintly, flat bare prints resume as if dropped from a height. He radios the rancher. They say nothing for a long time. In the report, he writes unknown subject, adds the temperature and closes the case. Alternative hypotheses sketch a different map. Psychogenic contagion, fear spreading through close-knit crews on long sleep-poor weeks, can prime eyes and ears to misread. Predators get misread too. A mountain lion's quiet can turn into an invisible intruder, a coyote's trot into a person's lope. Pranksters exploit belief, footprint stampers, night runners, drone pilots with spotlights. Clandestine human activity matters more than many admit. Poachers, thieves, and people who don't want their night business known. What nobody knew at the time, or didn't connect, is how regional infrasound and wind phenomena can press the dread button. Certain canyons and outbuildings generate low frequencies that humans don't hear as tone, but feel as unease. This pressure can spike heart rates and sharpen shadows at the edges of vision. Infrasound won't move a bolt, but it can tilt a night's entire interpretation. Still, witness consistency across decades deserves weight. Separate ranches report the same tactics. An intruder that tests doors but doesn't break them. Tracks that toy with pursuit. Mimicry that calls livestock by feed time sounds. Knocking that maps the house's weak points. If this is all noise, it's patterned noise. If it's human, it's someone fluent in the rules of the boundary. Investigators who balance respect and rigor develop protocols. Photograph before moving anything. Log wind, temperature, and scavenger presence. Cast prints with scale bars. Check locks and hinges for mechanical failure. Cross-reference call logs for human patterns. Repeat vehicles, lights on ridge roads, drones reported by neighbors. Bring wildlife officers who know how coyotes pull wire or how elk pressure gates. And when stories point to the sacred, step back. Note the claim without prying into restricted ground. Meanwhile, ranch law preserves countermeasures the way kitchens preserve recipes. Motion lights positioned to overlap. Gates wired so a lift leaves a telltale twist. Dogs rotated so no single pattern is predictable. Some families add spiritual safeguards we won't detail. They belong to them. Others just add friends, more eyes, more coffee, fewer hours alone at 3 a.m. The boundary of certainty remains. Evidence is thin in the way night makes everything thin. Yet the accounts don't scatter into nonsense. They cohere into a playbook. Skeptics hold their line with biology and human mischief. Facts that dispute easy debunking hold theirs. Prints that start in open snow, bolts that slide without tool marks. Deputies' logs that call something unresolved because that's the only honest word left. And so the roads keep their secrets and the fences keep getting checked before dawn. Speaking of the unknown, we have to ask why these shapes and rules persist. The archetype is stark, the trusted figure turned predator, not an outsider, but someone inside the circle who flips kinship into leverage. That inversion carries power because it corrupts what protects us: family, community, ritual, knowledge. In DNA ethics, Hojo is maintained through relations. Witchcraft stories mark the place where relations are weaponized. The body itself becomes a sign. Animal skins aren't just costumes. They signal liminality, human intelligence threaded through non-human motion. Night collapses boundaries. The animal form enters a human space. Doors, windows, thresholds become legal lines in an invisible court. When witnesses describe orbiting the light, they're describing a trial. The thing tests the fence, looks for consent, and measures resolve. Mimicry is the deepest cut. A borrowed voice is a perversion of kinship. You hear love used as a key. That's why the advice is so consistent. Don't answer. Consent isn't only physical, it's recognition. A name acknowledged is a door unlatched. From a social angle, this is exquisite risk management. It reframes danger as a choice you can refuse. But let's consider comparative echoes without flattening difference. European werewolf lore warns of appetites that break law. Philippine aswang tales center on a familiar intruder feeding where trust is assumed. Across cultures, shapeshifter stories, police boundaries under stress, war, famine, disease, colonization. The specific language is local, the function is shared. The unsettling truth is that communities everywhere invent guardians in the form of warnings. Modern life gives the motif new skin. Online, mimicry wears our faces, accounts get cloned, voices get synthesized. A DM arrives with the right nickname and cadence. The old rule holds: verify before you open. In that sense, Skinwalker logic predicts the social internet. Identity can be worn, therefore identity must be tested. The firewall is behavioral. Ask for proof only the real person would know. And communal, teach everyone to expect the test. Power flows both directions. Taboos protect knowledge, and knowledge protects people. Communities decide what stays private because secrets are nutrients for misuse. Some audiences call that secrecy mystique. From the inside, it's infrastructure. Like peeling back old wallpaper, you find layered safeguards beneath the scary pattern. Don't invite, don't reward, don't escalate. The thing is, technology also builds new rituals. Cameras, motion lights, locked apps, two-factor codes. They're contemporary prayers for boundary integrity. We stand at the intersection of belief and behavior. Modern relevance begins with respect. Indigenous voices ask for something simple. Don't turn living teachings into tourism. Don't treat other people's fear as an attraction. If you visit native land, learn the boundaries. Some places aren't for cameras. The point isn't to shut down curiosity, it's to protect what keeps people safe. That respect extends to how we talk about stories. There's a difference between amplifying a community warning and scavenging it for clicks. If someone shares a night account, they pay a cost, risking ridicule or backlash. Demanding proof can be its own harm. It pressures people to violate taboos or disclose what's meant to stay inside the circle. The ethical move is to hear the pattern without prying into the sacred. Practical guidance matters more than performance. If you're out at night, go with someone you trust. Tell someone where you're going and when you'll be back. Know the local wildlife and their calls. Fox, owl, coyote, elk. Keep a charged phone and a way to reach help where service drops. If you feel watched, step into the light and into company. If a voice calls your name from the dark, remember the rule that's kept generations safe. Don't answer from the threshold. Indigenous communities are already adapting practice. Some use motion cameras like sentries, not trophies. Some coordinate late-night check-ins by group text instead of telling stories that might invite the wrong attention. Some keep ceremonies even tighter, not to hoard power, but to keep it clean. Outsiders might call that secrecy. Inside, it's how Hoju survives modern pressure. Unfinished business remains. Not every account yields to inspection. A scream carries across a mesa without a source. Footprints start in open snow. A voice uses a name nobody should know. We can catalogue likely causes, and we should. We can also accept that ambiguity isn't a flaw. It's the boundary doing its job. The unknown is an edge, and edges protect the middle. So the path forward is straight but narrow. Move with caution, lead with respect. Use tools that make sense, locks, lights, logs, trusted companions, and refuse invitations that don't. If you film, film responsibly. If you listen, listen without demanding. And when the night leans in and tests your threshold, remember, you're not just guarding a door. You're guarding the agreements that let us live together without fear. Speaking of the unknown, there's that one sound we haven't returned to, the midnight scream that opened this road. It still rings, and it still asks a question none of our devices can settle. The scream could be a fox, wind across a culvert, or something that learned your name and wanted to know if you'd answer. Either way, it pulled a thread that connects the oldest caution to the newest screen. We fear what wears our shape and uses our voice because betrayal breaks more than trust. It fractures balance. If you want to keep exploring the shadows with us, hit subscribe. Tell me in the comments, where do you draw your line? What would make you close the door and wait for dawn? And if you've heard a voice from the dark, what did it say? Until next time, keep looking for what moves at the edge of the light.